Joining us now, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And his new book, published yesterday, is called Only the Strong, Reversing the Left's Plot to Sabotage American Power. We'll see what he really thinks in a second. Senator, thank you for joining us. It's good to have you. I saw the latest RCP Senate poll. It has 54 Republicans at this point, 46 Democrats. That's a big change in the last month.
Yeah, I mean, I think the American people are about to deliver a very resounding verdict against Joe Biden and the Democrats' ideological agenda. You know, they're struggling to feed their families, to fill up their gas tanks, to afford their rent and their utility bills. They're worried about their safety on their streets, sending their kids to parks with the drugs and the crime and the homelessness we have. And they know the Democrats don't have any answers for this. And in fact, the Democrats are behind a lot of these problems. So I think you're going to see a very large victory for Republicans next week.
The House, similar numbers, or?
Oh, sure. You know, when I got into New York a couple nights ago to launch my new book, Only the Strong, I turned on the nightly news, and it was wall-to-wall commercials for House districts in New York, in Connecticut, in New Jersey that Joe Biden won by 15 or 20 points.
You think New Hampshire? You think Hassan?
Yeah, I think Don Bolduc is going to beat Maggie Hassan. Look, Maggie Hassan's been a rubber stamp for Joe Biden, just like all these Democratic senators have been. She, at any point, like Joe Manchin has on occasion, like Kyrsten Sinema has on occasion, could have put her foot down the same way Raphael Warnock could have, or Mark Kelly, or Catherine Cortez Masto. But in the end, they just always went along with the Democrats' ideological agenda.
Yeah, we want to talk about the book and you know, what your basic points are. But can we just talk about the latest news? And that was the windfall profits initiative. You need 60 senators, wouldn't you, to do that? Was it a serious proposal? Or?
No, it's not a serious proposal. It's just Joe Biden trying to salvage a little bit before the election because the American people are so worried about gas prices. But I write about this in Only the Strong and the plot to sabotage American power. So much of the progressive left is ambivalent about America, certainly about our history. And therefore, they're openly hostile to the sources of our power, to include American energy, which literally powers our economy. You know, when your lights go off, you say the power is out. And Joe Biden promised openly in the 2020 campaign to eliminate fossil fuel production in America. And this windfall profits tax may just be the latest gimmick, but there's a reason why production is so strained in America, while you're paying $3.50, $4 a gallon for your gas, $5 and $6 a gallon out on the West Coast. It's because the progressive left has waged an ideological campaign against fossil fuel production in America. So these gas prices and energy prices are not an accident. This is what the left wants, but it's not what the American people want.
But how much of that is a function? And by the way, I don't disagree with you that clearly the Biden administration's policy has been to end fossil fuels as quickly as possible. I don't think he was planning to end it tomorrow, but if he could, he probably would have. The question is, how much of this is a function of what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Europe, what you think is flowing over here, what you think in terms of, I'm not arguing for a profits windfall tax, but you look at some of the profits that these oil companies are making, you look at what the refiners are doing. There's a lot of component parts to this.
Most of it is the result of bad policy choices by liberal Democrats. Sure, what happens in global markets or what happens in Ukraine has some effect. But Democrats have been waging this war on American energy for a long time. Remember, Barack Obama said that he wanted to bankrupt coal companies and that if he could pass his energy plans, your electricity bills would necessarily go up. You talk about profits of oil companies. Well, the simplest way to get oil companies' profits down is get the price of oil down. And the way to do that is produce more oil or refineries. The reason that we have a challenge with refineries is we haven't built new refineries in a long time. You have refineries that are having supply constraints. Say again?
Are you an advocate of clean tech at all, and how do you actually get to that? Do you advocate the transition? The question is how you do the transition, no?
No, we're not going to.
You think there's no transition even needed?
No, we're not going to transition away from oil and gas and coal and nuclear power, which should be a bigger part of the mix. I mean,
ever?
No, we can never get entirely off those sources of energy. Certainly not in our lifetime. Look, wind and solar can provide some supplement to our grid, but they're never going to replace oil and gas and coal and nuclear power, which provide reliable, stable, affordable baseload of power. I mean, on a lot of times the sun doesn't shine, or at nighttime, or the wind doesn't blow, or snow covers your solar panels. I mean, I thought a good kind of parody almost of the progressive left's energy policy that I write about in Only the Strong was a couple months ago when California 1 week passed a law mandating that gasoline-powered vehicles be eliminated, and then the next week they said don't charge your electric vehicles between the hours of 4 and 9 o'clock. I mean, most of these
because of strains on the grid.
Yeah, I mean, these people couldn't change a light bulb or a tire, much less redesign an entire electrical grid.
I saw, I didn't look at the source and I didn't confirm, but I saw that you need 60,000 miles on an electric vehicle. You need to get to 60,000 before your carbon is less than you would have had on a gas.
Yeah, I mean, a lot
and once
of
you get to 60 and above that, then it's lower.
Look, are we debating whether? Do you believe in climate change? I think he does.
Sure,
what did I just? I'm not talking. I didn't say one thing about that, Andrew. Do you want to start something?
No,
All I said was, if it takes 60,000 miles to get to where you're benefiting the carbon footprint, just know that you need 65,000, 70. The first 60,000 miles, a gas-powered vehicle is just as clean or cleaner. That's
So the climate is always changing, and the best evidence suggests that it's been warming up some over the last 200 to 250 years, which is to say during the period in which human productivity and quality of life has increased exponentially. And the reason it has is the development of coal and turbines in the 18th century, oil and gas in the 19th century, the nuclear power in the 20th century. But continued production of fossil fuels here in America, where we produce it much more cleanly than they do anywhere else in the world, and the innovation and the productivity growth we get from that is the best way to address any challenges from a changing climate. That's what I write about in Only the Strong. Look, I mean, quality of life and living standards for our founders and Jesus' disciples were not all that different. And the reason they weren't all that different is because energy sources hadn't changed. It's only in the last 200 years that you've had normal working citizens be able to enjoy the benefits of widely shared prosperity. And it's literally because American energy powers our economic growth.
Do you, let's just switch gears completely. The election season starts Wednesday, a week from today, doesn't it?
It feels to me like we're in the middle of an election season, Joe.
The next one. The next one. Oh, already the next one. I'm talking about for 2024. Some people are saying they're predicting a Trump-Biden rematch. Do you think that's possible?
Well, let's wait until Wednesday to talk about the next election. Because I'm focused on this.
Not wait till next year. Just wait till Wednesday.
Wait till Wednesday at least. I'll say this: anybody who wants to
who's the leader of the Republican Party right now?
Anybody who wants to run for the presidency should get a copy of Only the Strong to learn how to restore.
So you don't. Who is Donald Trump still the leader?
Look, when you're in the opposition, when you don't have the White House, and especially when you don't have the Congress, you kind of have a lot of voices blooming. When you get into a presidential election season and a party develops its nominee, then that person becomes the leader and the spokesman of the party.
Are you surprised that I think there was an appeal from other Republicans to not declare, if you're going to do it again in 2024, I'm talking about former President Trump, wait till after the midterms. Do you think he actually listened and waited for the good of the party? I'm not saying it's uncharacteristic, but normally he would do something that he thought would.
Well, in my conversations with the former president, I know that he's very committed to winning back majorities in the House and the Senate. He's been focused on that.
What about winning back the White House?
I know he's on. Well, I'm sure he wants to win back the White House as well for the party, but I know that he wants to win back the House and the Senate because he sees the damage that's been inflicted on America.
So you'd support him if he became the eventual nominee? You'd support him again, even after everything that happened?
I'll support the Republican nominee in 2024.
Senator, since you are on the Select Committee on Intelligence, just want to ask you about some breaking news. The New York Times reported this morning suggesting that Russian officials, these are Russian military leaders, not including Putin, have been discussing the use of nuclear weapons. I think these are tactical nuclear weapons. Putin wasn't even involved in the conversations, and you just wonder how much to worry about this. Is this more than just Putin's bluster at this point?
So, I mean, we always need to be mindful about our nuclear adversaries, Russia and China in particular, as we were throughout the Cold War. Thus far, we haven't seen any evidence of Russia moving its tactical nuclear weapons, smaller nuclear weapons that can fit on something as small as an artillery shell or a mortar round, for what have you, not intercontinental missiles. But it's something we need to be mindful of. At the same time, as I explained in Only the Strong, we also can't be scared into submission about it, just like we weren't during the Cold War. The way to deter aggression, whether it's the conventional aggression of tanks and artillery and aircraft that you see in Ukraine, or nuclear aggression, is to be strong and resolute.
You must talk about immigration in that. I was watching last night, I saw J.D. Vance on Brett Barrett at Town Hall with J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. And all J.D. Vance talked about. He just parroted exactly what you want to do with immigration. What's your plan? How do you want to fix illegal, and how do you want to fix legal?
Well, first off, we have an emergency at our southern border. We've had 5 million illegal aliens cross since Joe Biden came into office. That's the source of almost all drugs in America today. It really doesn't come from other countries anymore. It almost all comes from Mexico. Last year, we had over 100,000 drug deaths in this country. Almost twice as many people died in the entire Vietnam War. So it really is an emergency. So we have to secure our border. We have to crack down on fentanyl traffickers in particular here in America. I would suggest we need to take the fight to the cartels themselves.
Yep.
I write in Only the Strong that you should
terrorist
ask yourself,
organization?
what would you
designated
do?
a terrorist organization?
Just let me ask you this: what would you do if Al Qaeda or ISIS set up shop in Monterrey or Juarez or Tijuana and was responsible for killing 100,000 Americans a year? You know, there is a precedent for this. You know, it's well known that American special forces were present when El Chapo was captured a few years ago, and they were present when Pablo Escobar was killed in the 1990s. We overthrew an entire government in Panama under the first President Bush because of drug trafficking. We need to be much more aggressive with what we do against those drug traffickers.
Get to legal. You don't think it
so
should
legal
be
immigration as well. So I've long advocated that we need to remake our legal immigration system. Right now, almost all the green cards we give out are almost by like accident or luck or chance, either through chain migration for extended family members or for the diversity lottery or what have you. Only about 1 in 14 do we give out because of the skills one brings to this country. So I've got legislation that would change our system to something more like what Canada and Australia have.
Is it possible it ever passes?
I think right now, until we address the emergency and the crisis at the border, it's hard to address any other facet of immigration.
Senator, I wanted to ask you just about the polarization in the country. We talked about social media when we walked on. We were talking about Twitter and what's going on there. Yeah. But not just what's happening on social media, but how it's manifesting itself in reality. The attack on Paul Pelosi obviously was intended for Nancy Pelosi. The way certain sides of this have reacted. I think you probably saw Kerry Lake effectively making fun of Paul Pelosi, sort of putting this whole thing in light as opposed to taking it as seriously as I think you'd want. I'm sure that the other side would say, you know, look at folks who went after Kavanaugh or others.
On The View, they said, well, he didn't even have a gun. They discounted it.
So, but what's going on? And what do you think of this?
Well, I mean, first off, I'm very sorry about what happened to Paul Pelosi, and I wish him a full and rapid recovery. Political violence is serious. Violence is serious. If you look at Paul Pelosi's assailant, first off, he shouldn't have been in the country. He was an illegal alien who'd overstayed his visa. San Francisco is a sanctuary city. Second, he's clearly a deranged lunatic from everything we know. He shouldn't have been out on the streets. But everyone should be able to walk the streets safely, not just the speaker's husband, not just a Supreme Court justice. These men and women outside your window should be able to get on a subway without worrying about being shoved in front of a subway train or park their car in the streets of New York without having to worry about being carjacked. What we need to do is crack down on crime and get tougher about it, not just here in New York or San Francisco, but all across the country.
I guess we can wrap in a Twitter conversation with a big tech conversation with a China conversation. We can put it all together. Is that in the book as well?
Let's talk a lot, especially
what do we need for
content?
China. What do we need for content moderation? Should there be content moderation? Is it all covered by the First Amendment?
I think Elon said last week, you know, right after he closed on the deal, that it's not going to become a total free-for-all. He's not going to allow, you know, incendiary speech that's going to lead, that's inciting violence.
Will you pay $8 for an account?
I haven't given it any thought yet.
And do you think the government should
Well, you pay $8 for an account.
We were talking about it, actually. I might. Then we were talking about, could you expense it? I don't know if you could you expense it back to the taxpayer as a marketing vehicle or not a marketing vehicle, but a sort of communication vehicle, the same way I assume your office would expense the telephone.
It's $96 a year, Andrew.
This is the question. No, but then you do it for the whole staff.
No, I know.
He's got a budget. Everyone's got a budget. We're all trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. Do you think $8 makes sense?
I think, I'll leave that up to.
There's the separate issue, which is if it's a town square, you made this point earlier, which is if you got to pay to be part of the town square, it's not a town square.
Well, it's an elitist sort of institution at that point.
Well, I think the $8 is just for your coveted blue check mark. It's not a matter of being a part of the town square.
But you get a louder amplification if you pay.
So, I mean, I think I wish Elon all the best and success at Twitter and being able to turn it into what would be a genuine, viewpoint neutral forum for people to have debates. Because it's clear right now that Twitter, especially some of the information we've seen coming out about their collusion with left-wing officials at the Department of Homeland Security, are designed to suppress information that the administration doesn't want out there. That's not what a town square is. That's not what genuine free speech should be.
Sell and make a lot of Teslas in China.
They do. It'd be better.
How can Elon Musk be as tough on? I mean, that's a nice way of putting it. How can he be tough on China? Or how do we know he's not even nicer to China based on what he needs?
It'd be better to make a lot more of those here in America, or at least in North America or friendly nations. But that's true of almost every sector of our economy.
You think China's all over big tech in terms of their interests?
So big tech has a complicated relationship with China because in many cases China has kicked them out. Some companies like Apple are still deeply intertwined with China. Some companies are largely banned from China. China's tentacles, though, reach throughout our economy and really our society. I speak at great length and only the strong about the China lobby. And it's not just big multinationals who have outsourced production there. It's movie studios who want to get access to their markets, which is why there aren't Chinese villains in movies anymore. It's university presidents who depend on full freight tuition paying Chinese nationals.
NBA guys can't talk about.
Should TikTok be banned?
I don't think we should have TikTok now.
You don't think TikTok should exist in the
No, I mean, obviously, it's under the thumb of the Chinese communists. It can be used in ways to harm Americans, especially young Americans who don't know any better. I think parents in this country deserve protection for their kids from harms that may be lasting for their entire life.
I was going to ask you about antitrust and sort of regulatory, the regulatory scheme in this country. Do you think there's enough or the right type of competition? Just yesterday, Simon & Schuster, that transaction in the book publishing business was blocked. But I'm curious sort of how you see what this administration is doing, how you would do it.
So I haven't gotten deeply.
Because there does seem to be some bipartisan agreement, by the way. Some people think that big tech is too big.
I haven't gotten deeply into the Simon & Schuster question. A lot of that is a fact-based question about what's going to be good for consumers or things like the Kroger-Albertsons merger,
right.
Whether or not it's going to...
You're an author now. They were trying to protect authors in that case more than consumers, I think.
But what does worry me is the prospect of trying to use antitrust for something other than promoting consumer welfare and the health of the markets. There's some in Congress, especially in the Democratic Party, who are agitating that the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission should use antitrust laws, again, to kind of regulate viewpoints and content. And that's not the point of our antitrust laws.
Are you going to run for president in 2024?
Well, we've got an election 6 days away, so I'll focus on that election.
It helps to be tall. In the past, that has helped to be tall. You say you're 6'5", right?
Well, as I said earlier, anybody who wants to run for president should pick up a copy of Only the Strong. So they can understand how to restore American power.
One more time, Senator Cotton, thanks, and good to have you. It's been a while. You haven't been in studio. We're back, bigger and better than ever. There's a book, Only the Strong. Senator Tom Cotton, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.